Let's take a look at the Windows boot process for Windows 7, Vista, and XP. Windows 7 and Windows Vista use the command line tool BCDEDIT, which edits a file called BCD, known as the BCD data store or database, to manage bootloader menus and entries. Note that the term BCD is an acronym for Boot Configuration Data. In turn, BCDEDIT requires a bootloader, a file that contains the necessary information that instructs the system how to load the selected operating system. The BCD file is located on the hidden system partition at the /boot/BCD in Windows 7, whereas it is located at the C:\boot/BCD in Vista installations. The bootloader file for both of these Windows operating systems is called Boot Manager, that is spelled BOOTMGR, and it too is hidden on the root or C:\/ partition by default. Also note that BCDEDIT.exe can support other non-Windows bootloaders like Grub, Grub2, and Lila for Linux distributions such as Debian's Ubuntu or Red Hat's Fedora. To do this, you would place the bootloader file at the root of the boot manager partition. Example, root or /grldr or grub loader. Of course, Linux bootloaders like Grub and Lila will also boot Windows 7, Vista, and XP as well as their Linux operating systems. While it is true that Windows 7 and Vista BCD store entries may be edited manually with the command BCDEdit, either when Windows has loaded normally or when the command is run from the recovery environment command prompt with the Windows 7 or Vista DVD, there are third-party GUI tools such as EasyBCD that can do the job as well. NeoSmart's EasyBCD allows you to quickly and graphically edit the BCD data store. Here we're on a Windows 7 Ultimate Workstation. And let's go ahead and open a command prompt, and you'll need administrative permission. So if I didn't run this as administrator, I wouldn't have the necessary permission to edit my BCD data store. But let's go ahead and we'll right-click and run as administrator, and yes, sort of cooperate with UAC or user account control. And I'm just going to recurse out two directories, and I'll change the colors of this a little bit. So hopefully it'll be easier for you to see. A little black on white there. Okay. And some of the things that I could do, for instance, if I just use BCDEdit, that will show me the contents of my BCD data store. Remember, this is my Hackintosh. So I have three basic operating systems. I have Linux Ubuntu, and I have Windows 7 Ultimate, and I have Snow Leopard. All right, so operating Mac OS 10.6. Yeah. If you look at my bootloader configuration, let me pull this down here. And then you can see, in this case, my boot manager here, and these are the UUIDs for the operating systems that I have installed. The current one, the default one, is set to Windows 7. And then I also have down here, I have Snow Leopard, and then here's Ubuntu 10.10. Okay, so those would be my boot entries, and that's just using the command BCDEdit. Okay. Now, if I were going to back up my data store, I could use this command, BCDEdit, and I would say export, and C, and let's do, we'll just call it banana BCD. Don't know why, but the operation completed successfully. Okay, and in this case, so 32,768 bytes is the size of Banana BCD, but that's a backup of my BCD data store. And then if something happened, horrible disaster, and for some reason I couldn't use the automatic repair options, I'd be able to restore it with the command BCDEdit and then /import and C, and then just give it the path to. Don't even have to use the absolute path. I could use the relative path, and then so that just imported my BCD data store. Okay, so that's just example one there of both backing up and restoring the BCD data store. So I'm going to clear the screen here and display my BCD data store again, and let's look at some of the menu values here, sort of the string values. So in the next example, let's see what would be involved if we wanted to change the description. And let's see, which one will we pick? Why don't we pick our current one? I mean, I could pick this one, but that's a long UUID. I'd have to type out. Same thing here for both Mac and Ubuntu, but this is easy. This is just current. And that's probably the, me being lazy and not wanting to mistype it. Why don't we just pick that one? So we'll modify the description tag of Windows 7. But notice how they all have a string, a description tag, and that's what appears on the menu. So description Windows 7, description Ubuntu 10.10, description Mac Snow Leopard. So in this case, we'll change the current version, Windows 7. So BCDEDIT I would use, and then I'm going to use the command set, and in curly braces, there's the UUID, the Universal Unique Identifier, and let me close that curly brace there, current, and then the thing that I want to set, in this case the description string, and what will we call this? Windows 7 Cylon version 6. Okay, that's what we want to change the description to, and it tells me operation completed successfully. So again, notice right now, before I relist it, it says Windows 7. All right, so let me clear the screen and use BCDEdit. And now when I bring the screen up again, notice this is what would appear on my boot menu: Windows 7 Cylon version 6. Got it? And again, if I wanted to modify another entry, let me go over here, and boy, that's going to be a long UUID. Why don't we just copy and paste this? So I'm going to change my Snow Leopard here. Okay, and I'm going to go here, and there. I'd probably never get that right the first time. But copying and pasting is a wonderful thing, eh? Okay, and then I want to use the UUID, and again, we'll change the description of it. And in this case, let's see, what would we call it? Romper Room Super Mac Daddy. I don't know. Operation completed successfully. And again, let's look at BCDEdit. And so now our description tag is Romper Room Super Mac Daddy. And Windows 7 Cylon version 6. And then Ubuntu 10.10. Again, if we were going to edit that, BCDEdit and /set and my opening curly brace. And let me go ahead and grab this tag here. So when I get the UUID right here, and I get the last curly brace there too. Alright, so there's the closing curly brace and description, and the Mighty Penguin, and again I'm going to go ahead and list the contents thereof with BCDEdit, and that would give me the description. So now if we were to reboot and look at the menu, Ubuntu 10.10 Linux is going to be called the Mighty Penguin, and Snow Leopard is going to be called Romper Room Super Mac Daddy, and Windows 7 is going to be called Windows 7 Cylon version 6. Okay, so let's reboot and take a quick look at the menu. So we're just going to restart here. We'll just take a look at the menu entries. Okay, so I've rebooted and loaded into the Windows Boot Manager, and now you can see my menu entries that I can choose from. Windows 7 Cylon version 6 for Windows 7 Ultimate, the Mighty Penguin for Ubuntu 10.10, and Romper Room Super Mac Daddy for Snow Leopard. Let's summarize the Windows boot process for Windows XP, Windows Vista, and Windows 7. First, we'll take a look at the Windows XP boot process. In the XP boot process, the very first thing to occur is the post or power on self-test. During this process, the CMOS and BIOS settings are read. The second thing to occur is the master boot record, or MBR, finds the active drive, bootable partition, and reads the boot sector. The third step is the boot sector loads NT-loader, or NT-LDR. The fourth step is NT-LDR, that is the bootloader, loads and switches from real to protected mode so all memory can be addressed. It finds and loads ntdetect.com and it reads the hidden boot INI file. This brings us to the fifth step, the hidden boot INI file. This presents a menu of available operating systems to boot and tells NT-loader on which partition these operating systems are located and where it may find them. Sixth, ntdetect.com checks for and initializes devices and passes control back to NT-loader. Seventh, NT-loader then loads NTOS kernel exe, passing it the information from ntdetect.com. Eighth, the HAL DLL, or dynamic link library, is loaded and device drivers are loaded from HKey local machine system as well as other components stored in the registry. HAL stands for hardware abstraction layer, and it is an intermediate layer between the operating system and the hardware. Ninth, hardware profiles are loaded. 10th, registry settings are loaded, that is the remaining registry settings in the registry hive. And finally, 11, when logon exe is executed and waits for the system logon ID and password. Now let's examine the Windows 7 and Vista boot process. In the Windows 7 and Vista boot process, again, the first thing that happens is the power on self-test, or the CMOS and BIOS settings. And again, the second thing that happens is the master boot record, or MBR, is accessed. It finds the active drive, bootable partition, and reads the boot sector. Now, the third step is a little bit different. Instead of NT-loader, the boot sector loads boot manager, BOOTMGR. Finally, in the fourth step, boot manager, or the bootloader, looks for the active partition on the drive. It then loads the boot configuration data, or BCD data store. It uses the information stored in the BCD to finish finding and loading the selected operating system. BCD boot entries have four primary components. The first is the identifier. That's what the boot entry is named. The second is the device. That's the drive or virtual image that the system will use to boot the boot entry. The third is the path. That's the location on the device where the bootloader file is found. And the fourth is the description, which is just a friendly name given to the boot entry. Example, Windows 7. That would appear in the menu when you first boot Windows 7 or Vista. Next to each identifier, a UUID, or Universal Unique Identifier, appears in curly braces or brackets. This UUID is a unique code name that the system gives to each boot entry. It cannot be changed. UUIDs for bootloader entries always appear inside of curly braces or brackets. Some standard identifier UUIDs are boot manager, which is the boot manager, current, which is the operating system selected to boot at startup, default, which is the default operating system selected to boot the PC, and NT-loader, which is for Windows legacy operating systems such as Windows XP. Now that we've done a few things with BCDEDIT and looked at the changes in the boot menu, let's do some more. Remember, we need administrative privileges, so we have to right-click and say Run as Administrator because of UAC. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to go ahead and load up command prompt and recurse back several directories here, so we'll just have a little bit more margin or space there. And let me go ahead and display my current BCD store. So choose the command BCDEDIT. Alright, and so this is my current menu. These are my current menu settings in the BCD data store. And let's look at doing a few other things. We looked at backing up and restoring with export and import. We looked at listing the contents. So far we've looked at also changing the description tags or strings on each of them and using the UUIDs to access them. What if we wanted to change the order in which they appear? Right now it's Windows 7 and then Ubuntu and then Snow Leopard. So what if I wanted to put Snow Leopard on top? In this case, I would be able to do that. Basically, I could just modify the entry. So to do that, I would say BCDEDIT, and I want to do /, and I'm going to use the command display order, and after that, I want to use the UUID. So the UUID, let's say that we're going to put Snow Leopard. OS 10.6 up at the top there. So I want to grab this UUID. So I'm going to go over here and just grab this string here and come down here, paste it in, and close my little curly brace here. So now I have the UUID for the Mac operating system, or 10.6. And then I just want to add the switch. And I would just simply say add first. And that would basically move that up to the top. So now the Snow Leopard, or Romper Room Super Mac Daddy operating system, will be on the top. And then after that, we would have Windows 7, and then after that, we would have Ubuntu. Let's say that I wanted to move Windows 7 to the bottom. I could do the same thing. I'd want to get the UUID for Windows 7, however, this time, and instead of using add first, I'd use add last. So, for example, I could simply say current, and let me use a curly brace there. And then in this case, once I have the UUID, I can add the switch after display order. So I'd simply say add last instead of add first, and operation completed successfully. So let's go ahead and clear the screen, BCDEDIT to display the contents of what we have. And now if you look, here we have Romper Room Super Mac Daddy up top, we have the Mighty Penguin or Ubuntu in the middle, and now Windows 7 is at the bottom. And we could confirm this if we simply rebooted. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll take a look also once again at the boot menu. So let me restart. Now you can see the boot menu being read off my BCD data store, and you can see that Snow Leopard OS 10.6 is at the top, Ubuntu's in the middle, and Windows 7 is at the bottom indeed. Next, let's take a look at adding a legacy operating system. So right now I have a triple boot, but let's say I want to get a quadruple boot going on my computer because I just have too much hard drive space. I don't know. And we'll pick a legacy operating system like Windows XP. Remember that uses a special UUID of NT-Loader, the bootloader for Microsoft Windows XP. So once again, I want to right click and run a command prompt as administrator. I need those extra administrative privileges because of UAC, user account control. And let me pull this down here and recurse out a couple of directories, clear the screen, and look at my BCD data store. And you can see right now I just have 3 operating systems. The first being OS 10.6 or Snow Leopard, the next being Ubuntu 10.10 or the Mighty Penguin, and then the last being Windows 7. Alright, so I'm going to clear the screen. The first thing I want to do if I'm going to add Windows XP is I need to create a boot menu entry for it. So that's just going to be with the create option. So BCDEDIT /create, and I want to open a curly brace and NTLDR and close the curly brace and /D to specify the description, and I'd probably use something like Windows XP Pro SP3 Colonial Fleet Edition, Special Colonial Fleet Edition, hahaha. Well, that's, yes, I know I'm obsessed with BSG. Anyway, the next thing I want to do is specify the partition. Alright, so now I've created the menu entry, but I need to tell the BCD data store and boot manager where to go find it. So the next thing I want to do is BCDEDIT, and this time I'm going to use the set command, and again NTLDR, specify the specific or special UUID, and I want to use device partition equals, and let's hypothetically say we'll put it on C, although I'd probably create another partition for it like G or something, and I would have installed it there. Then the next thing I want to do is BCDEDIT, and now that I've created the menu entry and given it a title, Windows XP Pro Service Pack 3 Colonial Fleet Edition, and now I've also told boot manager where to find it, what partition it's on. Now I want to specify the path to NT-Loader, the NT-Loader file. So again, it would be the UUID NT-Loader, and in addition I have to specify the path, and in this case the root directory and NT-Loader. Okay, so that's the third line, or the third option. And then finally in the display order, I just need to specify, so let's say that I wanted this to appear for some reason at the top, okay, then I would say BCDEDIT and display order. If I can spell it, display order. Boy, I'm telling you, I've been up all night and that's starting to show. Okay, so BCDEDIT, display order, and open into LDR and close my curly brace there. And let's do add. We'll put it up at the top. We'll say add first. And operation completed. So those 4 lines would go ahead and add that menu entry into my BCD data store or my boot menu for Windows 7. So let's clear the screen and look at what we have now. So BCDEDIT, and now we can see here's the Windows Legacy operating system loader, and there's my Windows XP Pro Service Pack 3 Colonial Fleet Edition, and here's my Romper Room Super Mac Daddy or OS 10.6 Snow Leopard, and then next is my Ubuntu 10.10 the Mighty Penguin, and then finally is my Windows 7 Cylon version 6, because number 6 was awesome. Alright, so let's clear the screen. So I've added it, and of course if I reboot it, then that menu entry would appear. So let's one more time take a look at that. Alright, and here we are again looking at the BCD Data Store or boot menu. And notice up here, here's my legacy entry. Windows XP Pro Service Pack 3 Colonial Fleet Edition, Romper Room Super Mac Daddy, the Mighty Penguin, and Windows 7 Cylon version 6. And now that we've rebooted, let's take a look at one last example. So again, right click, Run as Administrator. And open a command prompt with full administrator privileges because of UAC. And I'm going to go here. And we recurse back to directories and clear the screen. And bring up my BCD data store. And you can see, here are my 4 operating systems in my quadruple boot. So Windows XP Pro Service Pack 3, and then there's Romper Room Super Mac Daddy OS 10.6 Snow Leopard. Here's Ubuntu 10.10 W and the Mighty Penguin, and then here's Windows 7, in this case Cylon version 6. Woohoo! Let's say that I wanted to get rid of my legacy operating system, or maybe I'm running out of space and I need it for data or something, who knows, or I want to put something else there. Maybe XP is not legacy enough for me. Maybe I'm going to try 2000 Pro or 98 or some craziness like that, and not run it in a virtual machine. So if I were going to do that, then I would want to, instead of using the create option, I want to use the delete option. And that's just BCDEDIT, like all the other commands, and then the switch would be delete. Of course, I would have to specify the UUID. And remember, that's that special legacy NT loader. And then if this were a normal operating system, that's all. I could just hit enter, and that would take care of the menu entry. But because it's legacy, because it's Windows XP and it's using NT loader and it's legacy, I also need to specify the force option. And that's an easy switch. It's just / and F to force that deletion. And operation completed successfully, so I've deleted that boot menu entry from my BCD data store. And let me clear the screen, and once again, BCDEDIT. And now you can see that instead of 4 entries, once again, there are only 3. So my quadruple boot is once again now only a triple boot. And there's Romper Room Super Mac Daddy at top where it should be, the Mighty Penguin in the middle, and Windows 7 Cylon version 6 at the bottom. Let's take a look at some BCDEDIT commands. First, to simply see your current BCD settings and discover how your BCD data store is configured, type BCDEDIT and follow it with enter from the command prompt. Or if you've booted into the recovery environment using the Windows 7 or Vista DVD, same thing. You would just type that into the command prompt and hit enter, and it would show you your configuration settings. Next, let's take a look at what it would take to back up or restore the BCD data store. To back it up, you'd use the command BCDEDIT / export C:/ or wherever you wanted to create the file, and then the file name. So Cylon_BCD would be my example. To restore the BCD data store, you would use BCDEDIT / import, and again the name and path of the file. Next, to change the menu entry display or description for the operating system selected to boot at startup, that is the standard UUID identifier current, you would use the command BCDEDIT / set current in curly braces description, and then in double quotes, official Cylon operating system number 6, or whatever you wanted to call it, banana. Of course, with me, it's going to be a Cylon. In our next example, to reposition the Windows XP operating system to appear first in the menu list, I use BCDEDIT / display order ntloader in curly braces as the identifier, and then the switch / add first. To reposition the operating system with the UUID, say XXX, to appear last in the menu list, I would use the command BCDEDIT / display order in my curly braces, of course the UUID XXX, and then I would tack on the switch / add last. In this next example, to specify partition G as the XP partition, I'd use the command BCDEDIT / set ntloader in curly braces and device partition equals G:. To specify the path to the ntloader file for Windows XP, I would have to use the command BCDEDIT / set ntloader in curly braces path \ntloader. To specify Windows XP as the default operating system that I would like to boot first, I'd have to use the command BCDEDIT / default and ntloader in curly braces. In the next example, to copy the startup boot entry and then automatically give that copy a new UUID, I'd use the command BCDEDIT / copy, a UUID identifier such as current in curly braces /d, and then in double quotes whatever I wanted to name the copy. So in my instance, it would be something like Cylon clone of Windows 7 boot entry. You can do really interesting things with BCDEDIT. For example, to add or remove dual-core CPU support while booting, as you could with msconfig, you could use the following commands. To add dual-core support, you would use the command BCDEDIT / set the UUID in curly braces, so XXX, and numproc2 for a number of processes. To remove this support, you would use the command BCDEDIT / delete value, and then XXX or the UUID in curly braces and numproc2. Examples of more basic operations would be creating and deleting BCD data store entries. So, to delete a BCD boot entry, you'd use the command BCDEDIT / delete and then specify the UUID in curly braces, in this example XXX. Note, to delete legacy ntloader entries, you must also use the force option. Example, BCDEDIT / delete ntloader or the UUID in curly braces, and then /f for force. Just as we can delete a BCD boot entry, we can create one. To create a BCD boot entry, you'd use the command BCDEDIT / create the UUID, in this example ntloader in curly braces, /d, and then in double quotes the descriptive string of what you wanted to create. So in this case for me, Windows XP Service Pack 3 Colonial Fleet Edition. Other interesting things you can do with BCDEDIT would include setting the amount of time you want the menu to display to allow the user to select the operating system before the default operating system is selected. So to do this, you'd use the command BCDEDIT / timeout and then specify a value, in my example 5, or BCDEDIT / set and then the UUID, in this case boot manager in curly braces, and specify the keyword timeout and then the value, in my case 5. Next, let's take a look at turning on or off hardware abstraction layer detection. To turn on or off HAL detection, you could use the commands BCDEDIT / set current or the UUID in curly braces and detect HAL yes to turn it on, or you could use the command sequence BCDEDIT / set the UUID, in this case current in curly braces, and detect HAL no to turn it off. To summarize, if we wanted to manually add an XP operating system after Windows 7 was already installed, we would need to enter these 4 lines of commands. First, BCDEDIT / create ntloader in curly braces /d, and then Windows XP or whatever you wanted to call it. Next, BCDEDIT / set ntloader in curly braces device partition equals f:, if XP is installed on that partition, that is the one with the letter F. Third, we want to use BCDEDIT / set ntloader or the UUID in curly braces path and then \ntloader to specify the path to ntloader on that partition. And finally, fourth, we want to use the command BCDEDIT /display order and then ntloader, or the UUID in curly braces, and /add last to add that to the bottom of the menus in our BCD data store. Finally, BCD data store corruption bears mentioning. At times, the BCD data store in the active partition becomes damaged or missing, or the Windows Boot Manager, that is BOOTMGR entry and path, is not present in the BCD store. When this misfortune occurs, you may receive error messages like file, boot, BCD, or status, some hexadecimal memory address like OXC00000034, or the Windows boot configuration data file is missing required information. When this deplorable debacle occurs, your limited options chiefly consist of 3 remedies, which we will list from the easiest to the most time-consuming as your BCD boot situation escalates from bad to worse. Now, wasn't it good of Microsoft to give us such a super wonderful boot configuration tool? First, you might repair the BCD store by using the Startup Repair option in Windows Recovery Environment after booting from the DVD. If you're lucky, this option is probably the quickest, easiest, and least involved. If that doesn't work, second, try to use boot rec from the command prompt in the recovery environment to automatically rebuild the data store after booting from the DVD. If that doesn't work, then try using BCDEDIT from the command prompt in the recovery environment to manually rebuild the data store after booting from the DVD. Sometimes you are even more misfortunate. Lady Luck has truly given you the finger. When this happens, the graphical user interface Startup Repair and the recovery environment command prompt's bootRec.exe tool cannot locate any missing Windows installations. This means that they cannot help you repair Windows 7 or Vista. You might be pulling your hair out, cussing and screaming Microsoft, wondering what on earth you're going to do. But it's okay. To repair a system when such horrible misfortune strikes you, you must remove and then recreate the BCD data store. To accomplish this, use the following sequence of commands. BCDEDIT /export C BCD, and then, well, whatever you want to call it, but basically you just have to export the BCD store. Then use the rename command and the command prompt in the recovery environment after you booted from the Windows 7 or Vista DVD. So it would be REN C:\boot /BCD to BCD old or BCD banana or BCD anything you want to call it, doesn't really matter. And then finally, last, use the command bootRec /rebuild BCD, and you'll then be able to rebuild the BCD data store and hopefully boot into your operating system once again.